Are you looking for ways to protect your money during a divorce? Here's what you're not gonna do. Pull a bunch of shady, You're not gonna try to hide your money or act like you don't have any or put it into gold bars under your mattress. The number one way you can protect your money in a divorce is be upfront and honest and candid from the beginning, because you will save a fortune in legal fees. So many marriages and divorces go on forever because one person believes the other person is hiding money. And then they do tons and tons of discovery, which is the part of the lawsuits that everyone hates, where you have to answer a bunch of requests and produce documents and do depositions. You will subject yourself to so much scrutiny that I promise you don't want. It's not just about your money. They're going to dig into all of your business. So you don't want that to happen to you. So from the beginning, disclose up front, give your lawyer your documents to produce, be forthright with your spouse about what exists so y'all can get on with the business of splitting it up and moving on with your life. If you don't, it could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars or more in legal fees. That's not puffery. That's not an exaggeration. If you hide money and you try to put it in things you've seen on TV, okay, real life is not like the movies. Putting some money in an offshore trust account, that sounds like something in a Matt Damon movie. Like, that is not gonna get you to where you wanna get to, which is on with your life with as much money as you can keep. In Texas, because we have community property, if you spend money on lawyers' fees, you're spending 50 cents of your dollar and 50 cents of her dollar. So keep that money in your pocket. Disclose early and often. There are a few things you can do to protect your money during a divorce without a prenup in Texas. And I specify in Texas because the way our property law works is a little different than most other states. We're in the minority. I think there are like 13 states who do it this way. Because in Texas, everything bought or acquired or owned prior to marriage is separate. Then you've got the date of marriage, and everything after is community property. So really, you're just looking at shoring up your separate property assets, because everything that you earn from your job or you get in stocks or whatever during the marriage is both of y'all's, unless you prenup or postnup around it. So one thing I would advise you to do without a prenup is have a very clear financial picture the day before you get married. How much money did you have in which accounts and in which stocks? What was the value of your separate property house that you already owned? And get detailed, specified bank statements, loan documents, appraisals, so that you can prove up what your separate property is right before you get married, so that later on, if you get divorced and you're saying, hey, I had $100,000 in that Chase bank account, and they'll be like, how do I know? And you'll be like, because of this here bank statement right here that says it the day before we got married. Another thing you can do to protect your money and investments during divorce without a prenup in Texas is to be very careful if you take separate property dollars and invest them into a community property asset. So what I want you to do is, if you have $50,000 that you want to take from before you were married and put it into the house you bought with your wife to give yourselves a new kitchen, you've got to be really careful, or you're never going to see that $50,000 again. And here's what I mean. What the separate property estate would be able to say, like at the divorce point, would be like, hey, no fair. I gave the community property $50,000 to fix up our kitchen. I want my $50,000 back into my separate property. I want to be paid back. But you don't get just the direct dollar for dollar money used. You get the increase in the value of the asset. So what you would do is get an appraisal done on the community property house before you did the new kitchen, and then an appraisal done on the house after you do the kitchen, so that very specifically you can see this increase in the value attributable to your separate property and seek that through a reimbursement or from the court. But you have to know specifically what that money went to. So that's one way you could try to protect your investments and assets during a divorce without a prenup. But even with all of these tips, the number one thing you can do to protect your assets during a divorce is to get a prenup or a premarital agreement. And hindsight's 20/20. If you're watching this, you may already be married and it's too late. So I get it. But for those of you who are just thinking about getting married and you want to be set up for the long term, you really can't do better than getting a premarital agreement where, at least in Texas, you can upend or change the way the property scheme works. You can say, hey, during this marriage, we don't want to create any community property. We want to have what's mine is mine and what's hers is hers, and that's it. You can do that with a prenup. Otherwise, what happens during the marriage is going to be both of y'all's. One caveat and one exception is called like we would refer to it as a postnup, but it's really a post-marital agreement. You can do this after you're married. The thing is, how easy do you think that's going to be to pull off? Because somebody is giving up something whenever you sign that agreement, or what's even the point? So if you're the one who wants the post-marital agreement, why would your spouse agree to it? They'd be giving up part of their stuff. The only time I ever see it happening, I guess it's in two instances. Number one would be some sort of like an asset protection situation where somebody has a really dangerous job, and if they ever get sued, they want to have their money protected, but that's probably not what you're thinking. The second one is if there's some sort of fracture in the marriage and one party demands a post-marital agreement to continue to stay in the marriage and work on it, then it might work. But you can avoid all of this if you just get a premarital agreement on the front end. And I know that's not the most romantic idea you've ever heard, but if you can get to a place prior to getting married with your partner that y'all can be the sort of people who talk about money, sex, kids, all of the hard stuff up front, your entire marriage will go better. It doesn't have to be this scary, horrible, awful conversation. And if it is, it may be a clue that you need to think a little bit more carefully before you move forward.